Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we're discussing Game 79 of the regular season between the San Jose Sharks and the Vegas Golden Knights, in which the Sharks have won 5-4 in the shootout. And before we go into talking about this game, we have to first travel back in time 3 years ago. The season was the 18-19 year. The Sharks had a very strong team. This was also the last year the Sharks even made the playoffs. And they were heading into the first round and were facing off against the Golden Knights, the very same Golden Knights team who was not only the Stanley Cup finalists in the previous year, but had eliminated the Sharks in the second round on their way to that finish. So the Sharks were looking for some revenge, but the first 4 games of that season, of that series did not go well. By a combination of some poor starts and some very bad goaltending, the Sharks found themselves trailing 3-1 in that series. However, Game 5 at home for the Sharks, they play a very complete game and manage to make it a 3-2 series lead for Vegas, moving into Las Vegas for Game 6. And in that game, the Sharks are outplayed, they're outskated, they're outshot, they're just completely and utterly dominated. But to Martin Jones's credit, he plays one of the best games of his entire career, making almost 60 saves to get the Sharks to that Game 7. In that Game 7, the Sharks are trailing 3-0 at the early point of the third period. But of course, the story is well known at this point. Pavelski goes down with an injury thanks to a Golden Knights player. They're called with a 5-minute major, and on the ensuing power play, the Sharks score 4 goals to eventually force the overtime in that game, and the most unlikely of heroes stands up and scores for the Sharks. It is Barclay Goodrow with the game-winning, series-winning goal to make history for the San Jose Sharks and eliminate the Golden Knights in the first round of that season. Now, travel back in time 3 years, in fact, just 3 years and 1 day into the future, as the anniversary was just yesterday. The San Jose Sharks are not playing with nearly the same amount of stakes. This game is not nearly as important as it was 3 years ago. Since the Sharks are not in the playoffs, this game really didn't necessarily matter if they won or lost, and yet it was still a game that the Sharks could get up for because of how meaningful it was for the Golden Knights. While this game did not kill the playoff chances for Vegas, it did fatally wound them, as the Golden Knights with this loss now find themselves 3 points out of a playoff spot, which is an extremely important break point, because even if they get one more win than the Golden Knights over the last 3 games of the season, or one more win than the Dallas Stars over the last 3 games of this season, they will still be a single point out thanks to this regulation loss. And this loss happened in a very similar fashion to the one 3 years ago. As we move into how this game went, the first period starts off, the Tomas Hertl scores his 30th of the season to make it a 1-0 lead for the Sharks, but the Golden Knights would tie it up, and it would be a 1-1 score at the end of the first period. In the second, the Golden Knights managed to score 2 straight to get a 3-1 lead, and at that point, with how well the Golden Knights had really just looked for the first half of that game, it didn't look like the Sharks really had it in them. The Golden Knights were the desperate team. They're trying to make the playoffs, and while the Sharks can certainly say that they wanted to stop the Golden Knights from doing that, it's not necessarily the same energy as when you're actually desperately trying to make it to the postseason, or at least so I thought. In the last minute or so of the second period, we would get Nick Bonino once again continues his hot streak, scores the goal here to bring the Golden Knights lead to within 1. In the third period, however, just like 3 years ago, the Golden Knights would score relatively early on to extend their lead back to that 2-goal cushion, and time then began to run out. There was no major penalty to save them this time around. They were trailing 2 goals, 10 minutes left, 5 minutes left, 3 minutes left, but eventually it is a very seemingly innocuous shot from the point from Nick Bonino once again that ends up going through multiple players as well as the Golden Knights goaltender Logan Thompson, and that brings the game to within 1. However, I've mentioned many times this season, the Sharks' track record when trailing by just a single goal with the goalie pulled is not very good. It seems as though whenever that happens, they end up playing very nervous and are unable to execute any sort of plays. And for the first bit, that seemingly was the case. The Sharks only they pulled the goalie at a point, and then there was a face-off in the offensive zone for the Golden Knights, so they had to put Reimer back in, and then they only ended up pulling him again with just about 40 or so seconds remaining in this game, and could never necessarily get it settled until the last 15 to 20 seconds of this third period. The Sharks moving the puck around the offensive zone, and eventually a shot is taken with about 6 seconds to go, and it is blocked by Brayden McNabb, a longtime Golden Knights player. But instead, surprisingly, by McNabb of just holding this puck along the wall, killing off the last few seconds of the clock, and pretty much securing the victory for the Golden Knights, he instead actually tries to clear this puck out of the zone. And that is a mistake, because Brent Burns has been keeping pucks in the zone for so many years at this point. One of the best defensemen in the league when it comes to keeping pucks in the zone at the blue line. He does so here. He gets the shot towards the net, and eventually it ends up on the stick of Timo Meier, and with just 0.9 seconds on the clock, he gets the game tying goal. However, the Sharks are not out of the woods yet. Even though they force overtime and they get the 1 point, it doesn't really matter if the Sharks get 1 point. It doesn't even matter if the Sharks get the 2 points. What matters is that the Golden Knights don't get the 2 points. And so we head to overtime. And the Sharks, while they started this season extremely well in the 3-on-3, they, as of late, have looked lost, and that definitely continued here tonight. The 3-on-3 play was just pitiful once more for the San Jose Sharks. They had like one chance, but they mostly just had a lot of holes in their play, and the Golden Knights had some great opportunities that Reimer had to make about 2 or 3 massive saves on, until Brent Burns ends up getting called for a penalty in the last 100 seconds of that overtime. And since Burns is a huge penalty kill, that's where the Sharks had to step up big. It was a combination of Megna, Ferraro, and then Couture and Hertl kind of cycled it out a bit with the couple of shifts that there were there. And some heroic penalty killing did go down. Sticks in lanes, blocking shots, just fantastic penalty killing. Reimer coming up with a big save as well, and we eventually went to the shootout. And Reimer, once again, fantastic play from him, makes a save on every single one of the Golden Knights shooters. The Sharks, they send out Couture. He goes for a shot. It's a save from Logan Thompson. They send out Timo Meier. He goes for a simple shot as well. Save from Logan Thompson. The Sharks' third shooter and the final shooter of the shootout is Thomas Bordeleau, the rookie, in his 5th career game ever, has 3 assists but has not scored his first career goal. So a pretty bold move from Bob Booner, but Bordeleau comes in, pulls off a fantastic deke, scores the goal, and wins this game for the Sharks and puts the Golden Knights in this very precarious situation, struggling to make the playoffs. And not just Sharks fans were happy with this victory, but pretty much any non-Vegas Golden Knights fan was very happy with this one, just based off of the reputation that the Golden Knights have currently at the NHL. So a fantastic game, very exciting. I can tell you that as of late, past month or so for the San Jose Sharks, I've obviously been excited when they've scored goals and the likes, but there hasn't really been a visceral reaction from me many of those times. But when that Meier goal was scored, when that Bordeleau shootout goal was scored, the excitement was insane. I jumped up, I did everything under the sun. This was a fantastic end to this game, and while this game in the end, in the grand scheme of things for the Sharks, doesn't really matter at all, the fact that they were able to really hurt the Golden Knights' playoff chances is a fantastic feeling. No offense to them, of course. Moving on to the players to talk about, I'll try to make this quick because just running through the game took a while, but we have the first line for the San Jose Sharks. Wasn't necessarily a super consistent game for them. They didn't completely dominate, but they had some very good chances and they buried on a couple of them. Obviously, Meier was the late hero for the San Jose Sharks who tied up this game, and Hertl managed to score his 30th of the season, so nice to see that the big boys in a big game managed to show up. When it comes to the second line, Bonino just continues to stay on fire. I have no idea what has gotten into him over these past few games, but he just cannot seem to not score at this point. He seemingly is just not doing any wrong. I mean, just look at the second goal from Bonino. The fact that this was a seeing eye shot from the point, I guess, kind of makes up for the fact that he started this season a good 25 games without a single point. this is kind of the hockey gods repaying him back. So nice to see that happening. When it comes to the third line for the San Jose Sharks, a pretty decent all-around game for them. One of the better lines for the San Jose Sharks. We also once again got to see the confidence that Booner is having in Bordeleau. Not only is he getting shifts with the goaltender pulled, hoping to try and tie up that game, he's getting shifts in the 3-on-3 overtime, and he's getting opportunities in the shootout where finally it pays dividends and he gets that game winner for the San Jose Sharks in that particular time of the game. So nice game for the third line. Fourth line, on the other hand, not a very good performance for them. That's really all I'll say about that. When it comes to the defensive side of things, Ferraro and Burns, once again, some solid defending in their own zone, I would say. Like I should obviously point out, in the overtime, Ferraro was one of those three players who were on the ice in that penalty killing situation and did a fantastic job for that. No one has ever argued the fact that Ferraro is a player who lays it all out on the line for the San Jose Sharks game in, game out, even if he's not necessarily playing super well. And so he is still a very, very important part of this team, even when not playing all that well. But having said that, he actually played a pretty decent game. On the second pairing, we do also have to talk about Jacob Megna. Played a fantastic game as well, was also a part of that penalty killing in the overtime. Great game for Megna. I must say, he's just been doing a very solid job on the defensive side of things a lot. Milosh, on the other hand, somewhat shaky, but Megna definitely I have been rather impressed with. So it's nice to see that the Sharks have not only found Jacob Middleton, I guess, this season, and he's now moved on to Minnesota at the trade deadline, but have also found maybe that hidden gem, Megna. Megna's obviously rather old, at least compared to sort of like a newer Sharks face, coming up almost near the age of 30 at this point, but still could be a solid defenseman into the future for the San Jose Sharks. On the third pairing, a bit to be desired. Nothing fantastic there from either Vlasic or Merkley. Merkley ended up not even getting all that much ice time in this game, about 13 minutes, and that's all to say there. And finally, there is James Reimer. Yes, he of course did let in 4 goals, which is not necessarily a fantastic look, and in a year's time, you might look back at this game and say, hey, he let in 4 goals, not that great. But Reimer was huge down the stretch for the San Jose Sharks, was the only reason why the Sharks managed to, or one of the main reasons why the San Jose Sharks managed to survive that overtime. He played a perfect shootout performance as well, some really difficult saves there, and so a great game for Reimer. But that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action. We're going to sort of bring the energy level downwards and downwards back on Tuesday, and we'll see. Honestly, the last 3 games, if the Sharks win, if the Sharks lose, I don't particularly care. This was the game that I had circled on the schedule. The Sharks won that, and we're going to be riding that high for the rest of the year. Class dismissed.